news, everyone! Tonight, passports are legal. For now. Gun ban shot down, Hernandez speaks out, and more. Good news starts right now. First up, in the most surprising plot twist so far this year, the NRA supports trans rights. To own guns, anyway. From Newsweek. Gun right groups took aim Friday at the Trump administration's reported consideration of a plan to restrict transgender Americans from owning firearms, claiming such a proposal is a non-starter. The National Rifle Association insists the Second Amendment, quote, isn't up for debate, as senior Justice Department officials have reportedly held internal deliberations about issuing regulations restricting transgender individuals from possessing guns in the wake of a shooting at a Catholic school in Minnesota that left 2 children dead and 17 others injured on August 27th. Quote, the NRA supports the Second Amendment rights of all law-abiding Americans purchase, possess, and use firearms, the group said in a statement posted on X. The NRA does not and will not support any policy proposals that implement sweeping gun bans that arbitrarily strip law-abiding citizens of their Second Amendment rights without due process. The Second Amendment Foundation, a Washington state-based gun rights advocacy nonprofit group, also blasted the Department of Justice's reported consideration of new firearms restrictions, saying it, quote, stands resoundingly in opposition of any such policies. Quote, the Second Amendment guarantees the rights of all Americans, and no subset of the people can be singled out for disparate treatment as punishment for the criminal acts of an apparent member of the group, SAF told Newsweek in a statement. Quote, gun owners are all too familiar with the tactic of punishing everyone for the evil criminal acts of an individual, and this issue is no different. The right to possess firearms can only be stripped away from Americans following, quote, lengthy and thorough due process that proves danger to society, according to SAF officials. Quote, disarming trans individuals based purely on their self-identification flies in the face of the Constitution and the current administration's purported support of the Second Amendment, SAF statement concluded. Beyond the bad policy and constitutional infirmities of such considerations, the Department of Justice has no authority to unilaterally identify groups of people that it would like to strip of their constitutional rights. SAF sincerely hopes that the reports of such considerations by the DOJ are inaccurate, as the policy reportedly being contemplated is worthy of the strongest possible condemnation and legal action. Gun Owners of America, a Virginia-based nonprofit with more than 2 million members and supporters, also denounced the Trump administration's reported plans. Quote, Gun Owners of America does not compromise with our support for the right of all people to keep and bear arms, GOA Senior Vice President Eric Pratt told Newsweek in a statement. Quote, that means we oppose any and all gun bans, whether proposed by Republicans or Democrats. Anti-gunners would happily label every gun owner crazy in order to confiscate our firearms and infringe on our rights. You're not going to give up an inch. The National Association for Gun Rights, meanwhile, noted that only a Title III court can adjudicate someone as mentally defective for the purposes of firearm restriction. Quote, it is a judicial branch function, not an executive branch function, NAGR President Dudley Brown told Newsweek in a statement. Quote, this process, and only this process, is available today as it may apply to transgenders or to Americans suffering from mental health issues. But taking rights away from any American without due process is an affront to the Constitution. All ex parte gun bans are unconstitutional. Brown said any new regulations imposed by the government would be abused in the future against, quote, ill-favored communities, including conservatives and law-abiding gun owners. Quote, our advice to the decision makers over at the ATF, DOJ, and FBI is to stop chasing headlines on the back of the Second Amendment and focus on preserving and protecting gun rights so that law-abiding Americans can defend their loved ones from violent nutcases, criminals, and gang members, Brown told Newsweek. Tobias Barrington-Wolff, a professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania, said any attempt by the Trump administration to restrict access to firearms from an entire class of adults would lead to swift and forceful constitutional rebuke. Quote, the Supreme Court of the United States has held that the Second Amendment to the Constitution guarantees an individual right to own firearms, Wolff told Newsweek on Friday. Quote, courts are still figuring out the exact contours of that right, but categorically denying someone the ability to own firearms is obviously a serious burden on that right. The government may place limits on those found to pose a serious danger to others, but being transgender does not make a person mentally ill, Wolff said. Quote, that should not even need to be said in 2025, he continued. Nor do trans people have any pattern of greater rates of violence towards others. To the contrary, trans people are targets of violence at higher rates than almost any other group of people. There are no grounds for treating trans people as a danger or a menace, and I predict the courts would quickly strike down any effort by this administration to take away their Second Amendment rights. The US State Department is ordered to continue processing correct passports. For now. From Reuters. A federal appeals court on Thursday declined to allow US President Donald Trump's administration to refuse to issue passports to transgender and non-binary Americans that reflected their gender identities. A three-judge panel of the Boston-based U.S. First Circuit Court of Appeals declined to put on hold an injunction issued by a trial judge barring the U.S. Department of State from enforcing a policy it adopted at Trump's direction. Quote, we're thankful the court rejected this effort by the Trump administration to enforce their discriminatory and baseless policy, said Lee Nowlin Soul, a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union, which pursued the case. The White House had no immediate comment. The lawsuit is one of several concerning an executive order Trump signed after returning to office on January 20th, directing the government to recognize only two biologically distinct sexes, male and female. The Republican president's order also directed the State Department to change its policies to only issue passports that, quote, accurately reflect the holder's sex. The State Department subsequently changed its passport policy to, quote, request the applicant's biological sex at birth, rather than permit applicants to self-identify their sex and to only allow them to be listed as male or female. Before Trump, the State Department for more than 3 decades allowed people to update the sex designation on their passports. In 2022, Democratic President Joe Biden's administration allowed passport applicants to choose X as a neutral sex marker on their passport applications, as well as being able to self-select M or F for male or female. Transgender, non-binary, and intersex people represented by the ACLU sued, arguing the policy unlawfully prevented them from obtaining passports consistent with their gender identities or with an X sex designation. U.S. District Judge Julia Kobik agreed, saying the State Department's policy was arbitrary and was rooted in an irrational prejudice toward transgender Americans that violated their equal protection rights under the U.S. Constitution's Fifth Amendment. Kobik, a Biden appointee, initially issued a narrow injunction covering 6 individual plaintiffs, but in June expanded it nationwide after granting the case class action status. The First Circuit panel, comprised of 3 Biden-appointed judges, said the administration failed to make a strong showing that an agency action implementing a presidential directive was unreviewable or meaningfully engage with Kobach's conclusion the policy reflected, quote, unconstitutional animus toward transgender Americans. Public health data is back on the menu. From the Associated Press. Federal officials have agreed to restore health and science-related web pages and data under a lawsuit settlement with doctors' groups and other organizations who sued. The settlement was announced last week by the lead plaintiffs in the case, the Washington State Medical Association. Soon after President Donald Trump's inauguration, federal health officials deleted or removed information on a range of topics, including pregnancy risks, opioid use disorder, and the AIDS epidemic. The move was made in reaction to a Trump executive order that told agencies to stop using the term gender in federal policies and documents. The administration saw it as a move to end the promotion of gender ideology. Doctors, scientists, and public health advocates saw it as an egregious example of government overreach, said Dr. John Bramhall, the organization's president, in a statement. Quote, this was trusted health information that vanished in the blink of an eye. Resources that, among other things, physicians rely on to manage patient health conditions and overall care, Bramhall said. The US Department of Health and Human Services has agreed to restore more than 100 websites and resources to the state they were in, said Graham Short, a spokesperson for the Washington State Doctors Group. Quote, we expect the sites will be restored in the coming weeks, Short said in an email. The case was filed in federal court in Seattle. The plaintiffs include, among others, the Vermont Medical Society, the Washington State Nurses Association, and the International Association of Providers of AIDS Care. The defendants included U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and federal health agencies and officials who work under him. Federal officials responded to questions about the settlement with this statement, quote, HHS remains committed to its mission of removing radical gender and DEI ideology from federal programs, subject to applicable law, to ensure taxpayer dollars deliver meaningful results for the American people. The case is similar to one filed in Washington, D.C. by Doctors for America and others against the government. That lawsuit also sought to force the government to restore health information to the public, and the two cases overlapped somewhat in the websites they targeted, Short said. In July, a judge for the Doctors of America case ordered restoration of websites. As of last week, 167 of the websites at issue had been restored, and 33 were still under review, according to a court filing. Although it should be noted that many websites have been tagged with a discretionary warning at the top, noting that while the information may be factual and scientifically accurate, it is not politically in keeping with the agenda of the administration, and therefore should not be taken seriously. Following up on the A.B. Hernandez story, the breakout minority track star from Jurupa Valley gave an interview herself earlier in the month. From CBS News. After facing national scrutiny for competing in California's track and field finals, a transgender athlete from Jurupa Valley responded to the critics who believe she does not belong in girls' sports. Quote, they swear I'm like this crazy danger to society, athlete A.B. Hernandez said. I'm just a normal kid going to school, playing sports. This summer, Hernandez, who was a high school junior at the time, took home first-place medals in both state high jump and the triple jump, and she placed second in the long jump event. During her journey to the state finals, Hernandez faced scrutiny from President Trump and other conservative politicians who claimed she had an unfair advantage. Demonstrators protested her participation in the state finals, some of whom carried signs that read, "Save Girls Sports," while an airplane also flew over the event pulling a banner that read, "No boys in girls sports." Quote, I think people just see one thing and they're like, oh, that's what you are, Hernandez said. They don't take the time to get to know me. So it's just a little frustrating. Now in her senior year, Hernandez has faced more challenges as she competes with Jurupa Valley High School's volleyball team. So far this season, at least 3 school teams have forfeited games rather than play against the Lady Jags. Quote, "A team sport. I can't take that," she said. "It's a team effort. My team needs to be willing to fight with me if that's what it takes to win a team title." On Thursday, Chaffee High School became one of 2 teams to compete against the Lady Jags so far this year, which was a sign of relief for Hernandez's mom. Quote, "I'm grateful, thankful," Nereida Hernandez said. "As a mom, it means a lot. Those girls mean a lot because I know it helps AB get through these hard times." Mrs. Hernandez said she initially did not accept her daughter's transition and understands other people's apprehension. Quote, "It wasn't normal," Nereida said. "I was raised Catholic. My parents were very strict with me. I have nothing but brothers. Like, in our household, it was always very macho." Nereida said she found out from other parents when AB began identifying as a girl in junior high. She questioned the school about why they allowed it to happen without her knowledge. She said she eventually changed her mind and understood the school's reasoning. Quote, "Shoot, they're protecting the kids because of parents like me," Nereida said. "We don't understand. We just get upset." In time, Nereida felt like she was only hurting her daughter by not letting AB be herself. Quote, "I did talk to her about how dangerous it is and how difficult it was going to be, but she's brave," Nereida said. "When I saw her courage, I was like, okay, I'm going to stand behind you." And in that match that Thursday, after 4 sets, Jurupa Valley defeated Chaffee High School. And finally, tonight we have to talk about Washington, D.C. and the ongoing, utterly exhausting saga of Congresswoman Nancy Mace versus basic human decency. Or, as I like to call it, the perpetual temper tantrum. This week, Mace dug up an old clip of Sarah McBride calling out Republicans for schoolyard bullying from almost a year ago, just to prove McBride correct by offering a playground-level nuh-uh that coincidentally asserts 2 things that are both visibly not true in the clip itself. Talk about denying reality. Look, Sarah McBride being elected was an historic moment, shattering a glass ceiling so high, Nancy Mace probably assumes it was made by the same company that manufactured the celestial dome she believes the stars are etched into. Mace, whose initial campaign was based on the falsehood that she broke barriers by being the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, that was Maxine Hudson way back in 1970, by the way. So someone breaking a real barrier, one even higher than her fictional claim, one can understand how she might feel intense, even uncontrollable envy. So Sarah gets to Washington, ready to tackle the national debt, healthcare, maybe even fix the metro. And what is the immediate, laser-focused priority of her colleague Nancy Mace? Is it a bipartisan effort to combat inflation? No. Is it securing funding for her constituents? Nope. It is drafting a resolution to ensure that the newly elected member can't use the staff bathroom. Think about that. Of all the things happening in the world, multiple wars, climate change, the fact they keep remaking Pride and Prejudice, this is the hill Nancy Mace has decided to die on. The public bathroom. She's behaving less like a U.S. representative and more like a 3-year-old whose sibling just got a new toy and the only thing she can think to do is lick it. And when McBride understandably pointed out that this behavior is perhaps a tad childish, A reasonable criticism, frankly, given that this entire spectacle has the intellectual maturity of a playground dispute over who gets the gerrymandering crayon. Mace didn't respond with a thoughtful defense of federal policy. Oh no, she doubled down. She got louder. She effectively stamped her little feet and demanded that everyone else join her in this very bizarre congressional version of My Ball You Can't Play. It is the political equivalent of throwing a fit that the kid with leukemia shouldn't be allowed to use a hairbrush because her hair is a wig. Except for the fact that Sarah McBride's hair is natural and Nancy Mace literally wears a wig. And honestly, I feel bad for her staff. I guarantee you, right now, somewhere in Mace's office, a poor, exhausted 22-year-old aide is frantically Googling, is there a congressional rule against hiding all the good snacks in the pantry so only I can eat them? Because that is the next logical step in this regression. I mean, the only way this could be more absurd is if, in the midst of a national showdown verging on a constitutional crisis over whether the most infamous child abusers in recent history, and given what's been going on in the churches, that's a pretty high bar, should be brought to justice, Mace desperately returns a late comeback on criticism from almost a year ago with an insult on the level of, "but your face." Cadet Mace, you took a year to dwell on this specific statement, and that's what you came up with? It's ridiculous! If personal insults were all you were left with, which kind of goes to show you really do have no actual argument, you could have at least said something cutting, like, "You have a high hairline." Though Mace might not want to compare hairlines. Or, "You wear too much makeup." Though the much older Mace might not want to bring up that subject either. The point is, if you're going to go out of your way to demonstrate your opponent is correct, that you can't stop thinking about her, as well as that your level of intellectual discourse is stuck at the pre-K level, at least aim for something that might hit. It's also insulting to toddlers. At least a toddler's motives are pure. They just want the juice box. Nancy Mace appears to be doing this purely because she isn't the center of attention, and now she just wants everyone else to be as miserable as she is. And that, ladies and gentlefolk, is the state of American politics, being constantly derailed by a woman who apparently peaked developmentally sometime between the introduction of object permanence and the ability to wipe herself. Her entire intellectual arsenal consists exclusively of hurling turd missiles, which says much more about her than the people she targets. Unfortunately, she throws about as well as a toddler too, which means she only succeeds in splattering shit everywhere. This isn't Mace's only cry for attention, of course. As various news outlets have reported, she's taken to shouting slurs over and over in official committee hearings.
Tranny, 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 I don't really care.
She has challenged other representatives to a fist fight across the tracks after school.
You want to take it outside?
Mr. Chairman, the committee is not in order.
She has talked about people's genitals on national television.
His penis isn't going to be in my bathroom. So.
This isn't just a pattern of disgraceful behavior. It's an inability to behave like a very small child.
Do not call me a child. I am no child.
But also, who could forget the time she vandalized her own house to astroturf some empathy for how much she suffers for her constituents? Or the time she endured a broken arm from a simple handshake? What a warrior! Or how she continues to lie about being the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, though she strangely makes no mention of the fact her daddy was the headmaster, or that she did not go on to military service. Why even mention the truth when the shiny lie gets so much more publicity? In other words, narcissistic histrionics. Thy name is Nancy. This is the first time her hissy fits have actually harmed millions of people directly, though, and that is worth notice. But no, making enraged fecal splatters all over government is not just her most prominent leadership skill, it seems to be her only one. Like a deranged diarrheal Jackson Pollock, she takes pride in the one thing she actually produces. Or should I say, what she never stops making. One can't help but notice the irony that a person so obsessed with restrooms is so utterly unable to control her bowel movements, metaphorically speaking. But as Representative McBride cautions, Mace isn't just a useful idiot for the far-right extremists trying to strip all women of rights. She's an intentional distraction. As McBride said, also about a year ago, quote, "I think we are all united that attempts to attack a vulnerable community are not only mean-spirited, but really an attempt to misdirect. Because every single time we hear the incoming administration or Republicans in Congress talk about any vulnerable group in this country, we have to be clear that it is an attempt to distract from what they're actually doing. Every single time we hear them say the word trans, look at what they're doing with their right hand. Look at what they're doing to pick the pocket of American workers, to fleece seniors by privatizing Social Security and Medicare. Every bit of time and energy that is used to divert the attention of the federal government to go after trans people is time and energy that is not focused on addressing the cost of living for our constituents. There is a real cost for the American worker every time they focus on this. At this moment, while even Marge Green is calling to hold the administration to account for his crimes with the late Jeffrey Epstein, is Mace bringing up a speech from a year ago to rebut with the most pathetic of attempted insults really a coincidence? Or is it an incredibly obvious and intentional distraction?
I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work.
Going forward, all patriotic Americans should consider responding to Mace's conspiracy-ridden, attention-seeking misbehavior with the only answer it deserves. Where are the Epstein files? If you enjoy content like this, make sure to subscribe. Transpositions Weekly is the home for trans-positive news, but also sports, analysis, and stories about trans people that all too often don't actually include any trans people. Support our efforts by sharing these videos with people who might like them, or people who might hate them, but really need to hear some facts. And if you can, consider contributing at patreon.com/thetranspositions. And join the Discord, because Discord, of course, is where the memes live, and our meme of the week was posted by yours truly. And if you discover unexpected allies when your own team keeps trying to throw you under a literal bus, join us. Also, if you have good news concerning trans people you'd like to see reported on, you can tell us about that in the Discord as well. For the Transpositions, I've been Ember Belrad.